Minnesota sports fans, we know all too well how it feels to sign up for a lifetime of purple pain. Welcome to Before We Die with Jesse and Thor on Purple Daily and Score North.
Hello, everybody. Happy Monday of a holiday week. We love it. It is also another Victory Monday. We didn't get to celebrate a Victory Monday last week. We get to go full on board with a Minnesota Vikings Victory Monday on today's Purple Dailies Before We Die, found on Score North. I'm Jesse Pierce. I saw a 4-0 Minnesota Wild sweep their latest homestand. Minnesota's winning. I am thrilled to be a Minnesota sports fan for maybe the first time in my entire existence of life. Thor down there, he's always a Purple fan. Constantly. He's not very good at his own Thor's hammers. We'll get into that later. But he's down there spitting some things at us as always. And over here, Ross Brundle wearing a beautiful Christmas shirt to commemorate the start of holiday week. Why don't you show us what you got, Ross?
Sure. As the comments have pointed out, I have a resemblance to Ralphie from A Christmas Story, aka Peter Billingsley. I will not hide from that, although I will say the older I get and the more, I followed the same diet since I was 15. All I do is eat frozen pizza. So you maybe don't look as good as you used to, but yeah, there's still a pretty good resemblance, I'd say. Right?
Just beautiful.
That was Peter Billingsley.
Yeah, who's calling? Is that Peter Billingsley?
It was Peter Billingsley. I wasn't afraid. My dear cousin Emily, shout out to her, who's trying to FaceTime me right now. She's probably not going to quit. I'm going to have to ignore that continuously. But guys, you know what I'm not going to ignore? Another Minnesota Vikings comeback. Not just any comeback, not just any second half above average team from Minnesota. The NFL's greatest comeback. I'll admit it. I turned the game off. I didn't turn it off because my husband was still watching, but I walked away. I said, screw this team. Some other choice words when they were down by 33 to the
some of those
Indianapolis
text messages too.
Right? Like I was just like, I'm done. I'm over this, whatever. I'm going to go enjoy my Saturday baking cookies with my children, which, spoiler alert, not as enjoyable as most might think. It's more of a chaotic problem. But you guys, we had the Minneapolis Miracle. We had the Miracle at the Met back in the 80s. What do we call this? What do we go with Saturday's comeback over the Indianapolis Colts? Do we call it just the Minnesota Miracle? I mean, there's got to be something even more powerful than Miracle.
Let's call it the stupid stunner.
You know what? I like that.
The first half was beyond ridiculous. I had Superfan Dan over and we were watching it. I was so deep in the tank at halftime that I forgot that I had a spot on this gambling show, VSIN or whatever. And they were calling me and I was like, I didn't even want to look at my phone. And then I realized I had the spot. I had to run down. Then they were asking me about the Vikings game. I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. And we almost shut it off, like, because there was bowl games going on and stuff like that, or at least put it on one of the secondary screens. And, then the Vikings scored the one touchdown, but the Colts got the field goal back. Even late in the third quarter, it was still super duper lopsided. What was it, 36-7 with 1:30 left in the third quarter? And then from there on out, the comeback, they just started chipping away. And obviously they got the game into overtime and completed the biggest comeback in NFL history. But it was stupid that they even had to get there, because in the first half, the Vikings basically just showed up to that game with a machine gun with a loaded clip. And in the first two quarters, just proceeded to unload every single bullet into their feet. It never should have gotten to that point, but it was really cool to see them come back once it had.
To keep with the movie Christmas movie thing, Merry Christmas, you filthy animals.
Exactly.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
What it was like.
Is there anything you can do? Can we do something with a magic horseshoe, because it was taking on the Indianapolis Colts and the horseshoe on their helmet? And the Vikings on the right side of history for once, setting the biggest comeback in NFL history. Poor Matt Ryan now on the wrong side of history twice in the Super Bowl, blowing the big lead, now the biggest regular season loss. I'd like to say we could use something with the horseshoe. I just don't know what that would be. To Thor's point, I'm not sure I've ever watched a worse half of football. There was very few things that you could pick out from the first half and say, well, that was okay. You had a pick six. You had penalties. You had I don't want to say it was bad defense, but it wasn't really good. It was just, I'm honestly struggling to even put words to the first half. And I was ready to come in here and just tear this team apart. And then we saw an entirely different game in the second half. And You guys know, this just as well as I do. You can spin this narrative any which way you want, right? You can say, well, they shouldn't have been down 33-0. Or you can say, yeah, look at what they did. They made history. I look at it as a little bit of both, right? You can't put yourself in that spot to get down like they did, but it also takes an incredible group of players and a resilient team to go into halftime at 33-0 and say, you know what? We can still win this game and actually believe it. I think oftentimes players, coaches, and teams will say it, but they know they're just saying it because they have to.
Yeah.
I think this team actually believes they can win any game they're playing in. And then you hear the story about Patrick Peterson telling the offense, we only need you to score 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
And again, he's not joking. He's being serious. So I'm choosing positive with the way the season's gone, positive Ross avoiding the pain. I am choosing to be a lot more positive about the Vikings Colts game than I am negative.
I mean, we've asked ourselves time and time again on this podcast in particular, across all of our Purple Daily stations, and I'm sure across all of the Minnesota Vikings fandom, is this truly an 11-3 team, and how sustainable is it for them to keep coming back? Clearly it's sustainable because they continue to do it week after week. It's frustrating. It's a roller coaster of emotions. It's chaotic. It's hysterics. It's frustrating and exciting all rolled into one. But at the end of the day, again, it's another victory. It's another feather in the cap for KOC. It's another feather in the cap for Kirk Cousins. Another one in there as well for Justin Jefferson. I want to talk a minute about Justin Jefferson. Not only is he on pace to get more than 1,900 yards this season, not only is he on pace for probably 2,000, he just continues to do things. He gets that head-to-head from Stephon, Gilmore, manages to go into concussion protocol, which
you're going to go into COVID protocol, Justin.
I'm about to go into COVID protocol. But the way JJ came back, what more can we say about him?
Well, just fabulous. And the thing that's so fun, when Randy Moss was on the Vikings, the thing that was so fun about him was a couple times per game, you were going to see something that you hadn't seen as far as the physicality, the speed, someone as long as that, just going downfield and then just plucking balls out of this guy. With Chris Carter, you were going to see a couple things per game that you hadn't seen as far as the body control and the hands. With JJ, the thing that consistently shocks me every single time is every single game, whether it's against elite cornerbacks or on down, you see him just shake people out of their shoes on the route running. The one with the touchdown against Gilmore, Gilmore could not have been more fooled. Justin Jefferson as a route runner, it sort of reminds me in the World Cup game, the same day or the day, I guess the day after, they went to the penalty kicks in the final game. And in the soccer, the penalty kicks, basically the goalie has to guess where the ball's going to go as the foot is hitting the ball, or else he has no chance to save it, right? Sometimes he guesses right, and then he's able to get his hand on it, whatever. Justin Jefferson's route running is like the goalie guesses wrong every single time. He's diving the opposite way that the ball is going. Or like the cup game you see in the stadium, and every single time the cornerback at the end of it has to guess what cup the rock is under, they always guess wrong. And then, Jefferson has athletic. He's more athletic than Jerry Rice, who's the other guy that you would put up with him as a route runner at this age. But Justin Jefferson's not as tall as Randy Moss. He's not as fast as Randy Moss. He doesn't have Carter's hands, and he doesn't have Carter's body control. But I think he's going to be better than both of them, because the combination of things, when you in conjunction with being an elite route runner, every single week he opens your eyes to the dominance that you're seeing.
So I'm not afraid to bring this up, which is funny because at the beginning of the year, I think when we talked about the Randy Moss, Justin Jefferson comparisons, I think I said, well, why not? Let's just have fun with it. But at the same time, it's really tough to compare two different players, especially if they came from two different generations. They're close, but separated by enough years. What more do we need to see from Justin Jefferson? Or I'll phrase it this way. How much longer does he need to have dominance like last year and this year to start to say, and not be afraid to say it out loud, this guy could be the best ever by the time it's done? I think it's too early to say that he is going to be, but we're not far off. Yeah, you have a couple more years like this. There's no telling what this guy can do.
I mean, that's just it. He's already shown us so much and continues to show us more week after week that there's no doubt in my mind that it is comfortable saying he is the best that there ever was. I mean, you talk about that on Gilmore, the way he broke Gilmore's ankles just to completely drop him. I mean, there's an intelligence there in that route running that is so few and far between when it comes to NFL players. And, you know, I've said before too, I kind of hate the comparisons. I hate making comparisons to players. I get why we do it. But ironically enough, Kirill Kaprizov in the Minnesota Wild locker room told us just yesterday after he reached 200 points in his career in 167 games, which is an incredible feat for those not familiar with hockey, Thor. He had said, you know, I'm just out there doing my job. It's up to you, the media, to make the comparisons and speculate in what you want, which I think Justin Jefferson's doing the same. He's like, hey, I'm doing what you guys are paying me to do. I'm doing what I know I'm capable of doing. You guys can say whatever you want, because I do think JJ just goes out there and competes and plays the game that he knows, and it's wowing all of us, certainly.
To this point, Randy Moss has been my favorite Viking of all time, and JJ is starting to sort of catch up in that regard. But one other thing I wanted to say about him, I could wax poetic about JJ for this entire episode and the next 20 as well. But Randy Moss, the one sort of nitpick you'd have with him was the I play when I want to play, you know, sort of a deal or whatever. JJ is a gamer. We saw it in the Colts game. That guy got hit in the chest from defenders that were launching themselves at him, trying to take him out of the game. And you know, a couple different times he had to go out of the game for like a play or two, especially on the one. I was like, oh man, that sucks. The Vikings are trying to complete this or, you know, they were on the road of it, but now you're gonna have to play the rest of the game without JJ. I think most receivers in the NFL are done at that point, and he took a couple shots like that. That guy's like a cyborg. His route running, it's the artistry aspect of it, but the way he prepares and then the way he is in the game, his mindset, he's like a robot. You cannot stop that guy. And he's not flashy with it. You know, it's not like the whole diva thing that we've got accustomed to from other elite receivers. You don't see that as much with him. He is a lunch pail guy and a technician. And I just really enjoy watching him.
And going back to that, again, that Gilmore head, it just, the amount of air Gilmore had to get to specifically go for his head and try to take him out still just really grinds my gears at this point. Like, I watched it again, like, oh my gosh, like, why? Like, it's cheap. It's not okay. I'm glad that JJ was okay. But yeah, I mean, you're probably unfortunately going to see more and more of that as Justin Jefferson continues to separate himself from the rest of the league. I also want to talk about KJ Osborne, boys. 12 catches on 15 targets. I mean, without question, solidifying his spot as a wide receiver 2 on this Minnesota Vikings squad, no?
Well, yeah, well, wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3, but I mean, in this game, he showed like I can be, whether it's like an awesome wide receiver 3 in the league, or maybe I even profile as a guy that can be a wide receiver 2. Or earlier this season, he was really struggling, you know, to the point we were banging the table for we need to bring in Odell Beckham so that you have the third guy on the field you can consistently trust, because I was getting to the point where I wasn't trusting KJ anymore. But yesterday was sort of the throwback to when his game was jumping up last year, and we were hoping that progression was going to continue into this season. We haven't seen that all season, but yesterday we saw that in spades. KJ Osborne legitimately was one of the best players on the field yesterday, and the Vikings don't beat the Colts without him. And I think that this goes to a larger point of, you know, Jefferson had a great game. Cousins had a great game. Za'Darius Smith, without doing too much as a pass rusher, had a great game because he really addressed the Colts run when the Colts went to run to try to kill the clock in the second half. But some of those Vikings, that their premier players were great, you know, as they usually are. But so many secondary players on the Vikings stepped up yesterday, where if they had not, the Vikings would not have completed that comeback. KJ Osborne front and center there. Duke Shelley, my man, the GOAT Duke Shelley. He had the best PFF grade of any Viking player on the entire field. And he played 79 snaps. Duke Shelley had an 83.9 PFF grade, 88.3 coverage grade. And then he had the game-saving tackle on Pittman where he got him before the first down line. But there were so many guys like that. DJ Wanham, Atomwo, these secondary players that came in and played really, really well in these sort of, whether it was bit parts or whether, in the case of Shelley and Osborne, they had to play larger roles and play the entire game. But very impressive, both by the front office for identifying those guys and then the coaching staff for building them up.
Well, and then we haven't even talked about Dalvin Cook, who had a decent game on the ground. Obviously, that screen pass. Yep, that screen pass where he just wouldn't go down scoring a touchdown. Don't forget about our guy Johnny Munt, also TJ Hawkinson with some nice catches. And it took a while to find him, but Adam Thielen late in the game, Mr. Reliable, catches the ball literally almost every time it's thrown to him. Thor, to your point, you can't complete a comeback like that with just Justin Jefferson, as good as he is. So nice to see everybody else step up. And one more final thing on Justin Jefferson, even though we're trying to give KJO a ton of credit here, which he deserves. And I think I brought it up on this podcast before. Justin Jefferson should get notoriety for how much of a freak athlete he is, the catches that he makes. He's virtually uncoverable. The only people who can cover Justin Jefferson is basically the Minnesota Vikings themselves with poor game plans or just not getting him the ball. You mentioned Randy Moss. Okay. Justin Jefferson's a better route runner than Randy Moss. Maybe not as gifted athletically, but he's a better route runner than Randy Moss. And again, people don't want to talk about it because it's not a sexy thing to talk about. He's a great run blocker. Justin Jefferson gets after it in the run game, and I know his teammates appreciate that. And look, if you're a team like the Minnesota Vikings that has a good running back, a couple nice ones, and you do need to run the ball a bit to set up that passing game, it's important for your receivers to run block, and Justin Jefferson does that.
And obviously, we cannot continue to give accolades without a shout out to Kirk Cousins. His second big game deficit to come back from the last game he won was a 24 deficit. You like that game for the Washington Redskins when they went on to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in week 7 of 2015. Kirk he's surprising me. I'll say it. I've never really been fully on board the Kirko Chains train until this year. Kirk is we maybe laughed at first when we thought he is going to lead a team to the Super Bowl, but obviously none of this really happens without his continued leadership and resilience on the field too.
Yeah, he's sort of steady Eddy, right? And the way that people degrade him, it's like, oh, he's a system quarterback, and that's probably the case, but he's the best one of his kind, I think, in the NFL at this point. Unless you consider he probably passed Tom Brady in that, I guess. But I mean, where that sort of benefits him is even when they're down 33-0, Kirk never changes, right? The circumstances around him change, the personnel changes, but Kirk never changes. And it was so cute at the end of the game when Pelissaro went up to him with the microphone and he was like, Kirk, you just completed the best comeback, the biggest comeback in NFL history. And Kirk was like, what? And he needed him to repeat it, and he just sort of took the moment to sort of let it fall over him and process it or whatever. But he's not a guy where he gets caught up in the things going around him. And I think that's, it's both something that people criticize him for, but it's also what it allows him to make some of these comebacks. Because it was like the second biggest comeback too. He had that, of the last however many years when he was with the Redskins, they had some enormous comeback. And then, even other games this year, like against the Bills, when they were down and everyone had stuck the fork in the Vikings already and they come back, Kirk's just steady Eddy. And when the circumstances around him are right, he can put up bazooka numbers. And you saw that in the second half, especially when they got the Colts on their heels. Every single read was correct. He was hitting them. And then, allowing the receivers to do their thing, or the Dalvin Cook thing, he got all the yak yardage on his own, but the rest of it, Kirk had him on their heels and with the receivers, whatever. That speaks to Kirk Cousins as a player. And yeah, with the right personnel around him, he absolutely can make a Super Bowl.
So I want to point out that Thor indirectly may have either just compared Kirk Cousins or said that Kirk Cousins is better than Tom Brady.
I heard that. I heard that. Yeah.
I saw you snicker at it too, Jesse. But that gives me a chance to hop in and kind of back up a little bit what Thor said. Thor said that, he's the steady Eddy. He stays the same. Kirk Cousins does. I believe it was Michael Jordan. So now I'm going to compare Kirk Cousins and Michael Jordan. Didn't Michael Jordan
we are just all in on Kirk James. He is the best thing ever in the entire world. Better than pizza.
Michael Jordan was asked about his performance in big moments, and he said, well, I don't change. Everybody else around me changes. If you can get into about quarterbacks in general, if you can get a guy like Kirk Cousins playing that position that is the same up 33-0 or down 33-0, you might just have something. And I think we need to take note of the importance of quarterback and head coach and maybe offensive coordinator relationship. And let's just continue to see how this plays out this year. Does it lead the Vikings back to an NFC Championship game? Does it take them to a Super Bowl? Can I say that word? I'm not sure if I can, but I just did. I continue to be incredibly intrigued because I'll be honest, and I know I'll get some hate comments for this. At 11-3, I still don't know what to think about this team. I'll tell you again. When the Vikings lost to the Lions, I said this doesn't really change my perception of the Minnesota Vikings. That comeback win doesn't really change my perception of the Minnesota Vikings. I think at this point, we know who the Minnesota Vikings are. They're a good team. They're not a great team. They can beat good teams. They'll need some things to go their way, but so will plenty of other teams in the NFL. It's sit back, relax, and enjoy it. That's all I can say, because you just don't see seasons like this very often.
No, and before we get critical, which I know our fan base absolutely hates, I was laughing about that this morning. I was like, you know what I've realized is Minnesota sports fans hate any sort of criticism, and not even like negative criticism, but just being like realistic. Like, hey, but this wasn't perfect and this wasn't perfect. And they're like, get the pitchforks. So bring your pitchforks out at me before we get to some slight criticisms I might have. Ross, is there a place that I could go get some alcohol to wash down my negative feelings?
Oh, absolutely. Great place to get some alcohol for all your holiday parties. Christmas right around the corner. That's Lake Ridge Liquors. Huge local craft beer selection. You know that by now because you know that, or you know because you've been there to pick up some Before We Die from Surly. They have that. Plenty of other great Surly beers as well. Over 1,000 wines in stock. I'll say that again. 1,000 wines in stock. And don't forget about that 40-foot long wall of whiskey, including a Lake Ridge exclusive barrel pick of Jefferson's rye. Single barrel. Only 4 barrels made it to Minnesota. They got one. A convenient location just 30 seconds off of 694 on Rice Street, with great prices, great service, a great locally owned staff, operated by Minnesota sports fans. How can you not support Lake Ridge Liquors? They even have a rewards program. You mentioned Score North. They're going to load you up with $5 in rewards. Yeah, super simple. Just mention Score North sends you, and restock your liquor cabinet for those upcoming holiday parties. Again, Lake Ridge Liquors, just 30 seconds off of 694 and Rice Street. And Jesse, you know, it's the giving mood, right? Giving season. Mm-hmm. I'm in the giving mood today because this is the type of year where we need to help others. And people have maybe caught this watching this edition on YouTube or listening wherever they get their podcasts. This is your flu game, Jesse. You're battling through this one. So in an effort to help you, I am going to take some work off of your plate I told you that you could do. I'm just going to handle it on my own. I'm going to let you rest your voice, and I'm going to tell everybody about our friends. What friends, you might ask? Well, that would be the Cousins Crusaders. A brief message on behalf of those crazy Canadian Cousins Crusaders of Purple Daily. We have a group of crazy Canadians. They're Cousin Crusaders, huge Kirk Cousins fans. Some like to call them stans. They reached out and asked Purple Daily if we would help them celebrate this incredibly fun season. We said, sure, why not? So we're helping pitch in and help Kirk Cousins charity. What a great idea. What a great cause. KirkCousins.org. Click on the donate button. Donate whatever you can, whatever you feel comfortable with. When you donate, mention it's on behalf of the Cousins Crusaders of Purple Daily. That's KirkCousins.org on behalf of the Cousins Crusaders of Purple Daily.
See, and you do such a beautiful job with those reads anyway. Much better than when you guys see me hacking in the corner for those watching on YouTube, I'm okay. I promise. It's something that has kicked in as of yesterday. I had to make it through one hockey game in this show, and I was like, it boils up inside of me. The more I think about it, the worse it gets.
I will say this today. I feel very tongue twisted. I've had a tough time getting some words out on this podcast. So I do apologize and just shred me on the YouTube comments. If
Words
you'd
are
like.
hard. Words are hard, man.
Words are very
I
hard.
sympathize. You know what's hard is for Jalen Reagor to catch a football, apparently. Is there ever a reason to throw to him ever again? Like, can we be done with this, I think?
Certainly not deep. No, I mean he's been a struggle bus his entire career with that. Phil had the stat that he tweeted out. I'm not gonna be able to find it right now, but like I think it was on career targets over 20 yards downfield. Jalen Reagor he has gotten 0 touchdowns, and the opposition has gotten 5 interceptions. I mean, he only has a couple of receptions. It's not good, but luckily. To our earlier point, Osborne has stepped up, and so you don't need Reagor out there as much. Maybe you can do a couple of trick plays with him on the end arounds, but you cannot target him down beyond even 10 yards downfield. So I've either got to be short stuff or end arounds, or just use him on the returns.
Just use them on the returns. I'm done. I'm over it. I'm kind of done. It's not great. I'm done saying Reagor, whatever we want to call him.
I was shamed into changing my pronunciation.
I know. And then we stopped talking about him altogether because he does nothing very effectively.
I think I think we already knew it, but now we really know it is there's a reason why Philadelphia was, I don't want to say eager to give up on him, but the price tag to get him was, the price tag to get him was not nearly what it was for the Eagles to draft him. So,
but players that we,
it's okay. So this is according to Phil's tweet on Saturday. Reagor 5 for 28 on career targets of 20+ yard passes, 0 touchdowns, 5 interceptions for the opposition. Never throw it to him downfield ever again.
And that's, to me, that was the perplexing part of the interception that Cousins threw, one of 2 in the day. The one was awful. That one, I don't even know how. The second one that was to Reagor, I don't know how much of that you can actually put on Kirk Cousins, but he just stopped running the route. I mean, that's a problem. I mean, I remember that from flag football back in the days. You never stop running your route, and if you do, the quarterback needs to see that. Yeah, it's just that makes
elementary
no sense to me.
I need to go back to this. Jalen Reagor has erroneously guaranteed more victories against the Detroit Lions this year that the Vikings have not won than he has touchdowns on 20+ yard targets in his career in the NFL. Don't throw it to him ever again downfield, please.
Ever again.
We talked about this last week. Of all people to get Hottie and guarantee a victory over the Lions 2 weeks ago, why him?
I will say I have it on good information that he was very much baited into that answer a little bit. So we maybe took it and run with it because sometimes us media jackals like to do that.
Jesse, he has not earned the benefit of the doubt. Don't give it to him.
I'm just saying, I have been a good authority. He was very baited into
only
answering
Chris Boyd
has
deserved the benefit of the doubt. He's the only one that gets one.
Well, players that I would like to see back with the Minnesota Vikings next year, not Reagor, would be Patrick Peterson. You guys, dude has been playing exceptionally well. As Ross had mentioned earlier, he apparently was a big reason that they were able to kind of manifest this comeback, comical or not, saying, hey, we got those 5 touchdowns, no big deal. What do you guys think? Do you want Pat P back in the Vikings? I mean, I think it's a pretty easy yes.
I want him to, before that happens, I want him to run the 40 and do the shuttles. The only question is with his athleticism, like how long can it keep going? But he's not only, a solid starter for a defense of this team that has won 11 games so far, but he's also, I mean, by any measure, the spiritual leader of the defense as well. Like, it wasn't surprising at all, like in the post-game interview. So when the players were like, yeah, Pat P came into the locker room and he's like, we only need 5 touchdowns. And we were all looking at him like, what the hell is this guy talking about? We only need 5 touchdowns. Dude, we're down 33-0. And then, after they come back and complete it, Pat P's like, I told you guys, only 5 touchdowns. And it's not the first time it's happened, right? Like, there was the game earlier this season, was it in Miami or wherever it was, where Pat P was guaranteeing that he was going to have the game-winning interception. Maybe it wasn't. I forget which game it was, but then he did.
That's false news. I've never heard that.
No, he did. He said he was going to have the game-sealing interception. He absolutely had it. Like,
didn't he
does this over and over again.
I think, was that maybe the Cardinals? He was going to have the game-winning interception against the Cardinals, his former team. I'm not positive on that either. Patrick Peterson, to me, though, he's the type of guy you're always going to want back at the right price and the right terms. This is not a guy you're going to give more than probably a 1-year deal to, but if you can fit him in under the cap, it's always going to be worth it. And the reason why you don't want to give him more than 1 year is when he hits that cliff, you don't want to be on the hook for an additional year. So to me, it's always, can you make the price point and can you make it work on a 1-year deal? Seems like he's okay with that. He did that this year. Hopefully he'll do it again, because I'll always take the chance that it'll continue until it doesn't, as long as it's on a 1-year deal.
A shining star on I'm just going to say it, a crap defense. Another poor showing from Ed Donatello's defense. Obviously, they were a big part of the second half comeback because, yes, the offense was finally able to score, but you also needed the defense to hold, except they are holding against the Indianapolis Colts, an offense that was without Jonathan Taylor after an injury. I mean, do we change our mind about the defense at all? Has there been any improvement, enough improvement for us to be confident in it being a Super Bowl defensive team?
Jesse, as you know, every time this year where you put the ball on the tee for me, I like to rip at Donatello. I go back like Happy Gilmore and I crush that thing. I'm not going to do it here, though. In the first half, when everything was going wrong, the two worst units on the Vikings, it was, well, firstly, the special teams, like we were talking about before. It was 10-0 before you even opened your eyes. And that was all in the special teams, right? Like the long opening kickoff return led to the field goal. The defense held them. You know, they didn't give up many yards there. And then the next one was the block punt that went for a touchdown or whatever. And then, 7 more of the points came on Cousins and the pick six. The defense was consistently put into bad spots in the first half. But then, like you mentioned, after halftime, they played really, really well to get that back. And they had some huge stops and huge different plays that allowed the Vikings to come back. So I didn't think that Donatello had that bad, poor of a game, or the defense overall against the Colts. But then again, you do have to give the caveat. The Colts have one of the worst offenses in the NFL as is. And Jonathan Taylor got injured right away, by far their best player.
I'll say this about Ed's boys here. If you want me to really buy in and think that this could be a team that makes it to a Super Bowl, perhaps wins the Super Bowl and lets the Vikings finally party with the Lombardi, be the reason the final 3 games of the year, be the reason the Minnesota Vikings hold on to the number 2 seed. Play well at home against the New York Giants, win the game. Go on the road in probably poor conditions and cold weather in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and Chicago, Illinois, and be the reason you win those 2 games. Finish this year 14-3, be the number 2 seed, and let me believe that you're heading in the right direction going into the playoffs, where you're going to play better teams than the Giants, Packers, and Bears. Start playing well against those 3 teams. Then maybe I'll start to believe in you. I'm with Thor. Look, I didn't think the defense played all that bad on Saturday. They really didn't, despite what the score shows. However, it's against a biblically bad offense with a quarterback that can move in the pocket about as well as I can. So I'm not going to really give them any credit for it, other than they did what they should have done. Keep doing it for 3 more weeks. Be the reason you're the number 2 seed, and let's go from there.
Let's go.
I mean, can we also just take a moment to laugh at the rest of the NFL, which was just a chaotic weekend, starting with obviously Saturday's game, carried over into yesterday with whatever happened to that New England Patriots team, to the Dallas Cowboys losing to the Jags. I mean, just fantastic football this weekend, and a lot of 1-score games. I mean, that includes, I think, Eagles and Bears came down to just a 5-point game. I mean, some fun. The football.
NFL in December can really be a beautiful thing. I mean, it can just be really fun, and literally every play means something. Great time of year.
I saw probably the crazy, like even crazier than all the stats from the Vikings game, and there was a historical game. It's crazy, but an even crazier stat from the NFL, by and large in Week 15 was, you were more, if you got down by 17 points in a game, you were more likely to win it this week than you were to lose it. There was either 5 or 6, and only 2 of the teams ended up holding on to win that got to a 17-point lead. And then it was either 3 or 4 teams that came back and ended up winning once they had gotten down by 17. Just wild.
We're living in such a bizarro world right now. I didn't even know that Trace McSorley still existed until he took the field for the Cardinals yesterday. I'm like, oh, this guy's still a thing. He's in the NFL, huh? I had no clue.
Still a thing. No, who's still a thing too?
Not going well.
Purdy.
Brock Purdy. He's pretty good.
BCB.
Yeah,
Gotta love
Purdy's
it.
doing okay. He's proving
Purdy's
me
doing
wrong out
okay.
there.
Not that I want to give credit to the 49ers, but Brock Purdy, Cyclones. Go Cyclones.
McSorley is who we thought he was, and that
Exactly.
it works because he's on the Cardinals.
Exactly. Well, we'll talk a little bit more playoffs in Thursday's edition of Purple Dailies Before We Die, presented on Score North, as well as a look at the next matchup for your Minnesota Vikings. As always, we're slinging you Minnesota Vikings content each and every Monday and Thursday of the week, along with all of the other Purple Daily content. Realistic Randy, you got Boone, and obviously you got Judd, Phil, and Dex over on all of their Vent Lines content. Good stuff happening there. You can find me as well over on the Twitter sphere, Thor on the Twitter sphere, Ross on the Twitter sphere. We're always just having a good old time, good old fashioned fun out there. And I'm still winning in Thor's Hammers. We'll also discuss that come Thursday. You guys have a great rest of your week. Go Vikings.
Skol Vikings.
Hannah Pen.